The blazing Arizona sun pressed down like a brand on cracked earth. Zora Nesmith crawled across the wasteland, her lips split and bleeding, vision blurring from 3 days without water. In the distance, a figure on horseback approached. A weathered cowboy with kind eyes but hands that knew hard work. "Please," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "Give me water. I'll be your concubine." Arthur pulled his horse to a stop. His hand moved toward his gun belt, then stopped. The moral weight of the moment settled between them like desert heat, a dying woman offering herself for survival. He dismounted slowly, drew his canteen, knelt beside her in the dust. "Water's free for anyone dying of thirst, ma'am." Arthur poured water carefully into her mouth. She drank like salvation itself. Color returned to her dark skin. Her breathing steadied. She studied his face, searching for the catch, the price that would come later. "No strings attached," he said, reading. Her expression. As Zora recovered in the shade of his horse, Arthur noticed things. The way she identified edible desert plants. How she treated a cut on his hand with practiced skill. Her speech carried education that didn't match her worn clothes. "I'm a cattle driver," Arthur said. "Heading to Silver Creek with my crew. Could use someone who knows plants and healing." Zora's eyes sharpened. Honest work, not charity, not ownership. "I can cook too," she said. "Fair wages, your own bedroll. Leave any time you want." She nodded once. "A business arrangement." Nothing more. They rode toward his camp as the sun began its descent. Arthur's crew gathered around the dying fire. 5 men, all weathered by frontier life. Their faces changed when they saw Zora. Micah Bell spat into the dirt. "You bringing strays to supper now, Arthur?" "She's our new cook and camp medic," Arthur said. His voice carried finality. John Marston, Arthur's longtime friend, stepped forward. "We didn't vote on this. Wasn't asking for a vote." The tension stretched taut. Zora felt the weight of their stares. She'd navigated hostile territory before. Survival meant reading men quickly. "I'll earn my keep," she said simply. That first night, she proved it. Stew that actually had flavor. Poultices for saddle sores. Quiet competence that slowly shifted the camp's mood. All except Micah, who watched her with cold calculation. 3 days into their journey, they reached Tombstone. Arthur needed supplies. Zora stayed with the cattle while the men went into town. She used the time to gather desert sage and willow bark. Healing plants for the trail ahead. Arthur returned at a gallop. His face was stone. "We need to leave. Now." "What happened?" John asked. Sheriff recognized her from a wanted poster. "Murder charge." The crew's faces went hard. Micah smiled. "Like a wolf. You brought a killer into our camp," Micah said. "I brought someone who needed help," Arthur replied. "Help that's gonna get us all hanged." Zora stepped forward. "I won't bring trouble on you. I'll go." Arthur looked at her, saw the resigned dignity in her posture, the way she'd already started gathering her few possessions. A woman used to being abandoned. "No," he said. "You're under my protection." The sheriff's posse appeared on the horizon, dust clouds rising. Arthur made his choice in that moment. Everything he'd built, his reputation, his safety, all of it secondary to doing what was right. "Mount up," he ordered. "We ride hard." Micah stepped back. "You're choosing her over us?" "I'm choosing right over wrong." The crew split in that moment. Micah and 2 others stayed behind, taking half the cattle. They'd wait for the posse, tell them which direction Arthur had gone, profit from betrayal. John hesitated. His loyalty to Arthur warred with his survival instincts. "Your choice, John," Arthur said quietly. John mounted his horse. 2 other men followed. 4 riders and 20 head of cattle. Not the crew Arthur had started with, but the crew he could trust. They rode through the night. Zora kept pace her horse stolen from her former master's stable. As dawn broke, they stopped to rest the animals. "I need to know," Arthur said to Zora. "What really happened?" She looked at him, measuring his character one more time. "I didn't murder anyone," she said. "I poisoned him to stop him from selling my daughter south." The truth hung between them. Not murder, desperation, a mother's love pushed past all boundaries. "He lived long enough to name me," she continued. "Died 3 days later," Arthur nodded. "He'd killed men in war, clean kills with rifles." This was Messier, but no less justified. "Where's your daughter now?" John asked. "Hidden, safe, I hope." They rode on. The posse would follow. Other dangers lay ahead. But something had shifted in that moment of choice. Arthur had picked his side. Zora had found someone who wouldn't abandon her. The desert stretched endlessly before them. Heat waves danced on the horizon. Behind them, dust clouds grew larger. The hunt had begun. The mesa offered shelter from pursuing eyes. Red rock walls held the heat of day, released it slowly into desert night. Arthur's reduced crew made camp in silence, each man tending his horse. With the careful attention of those who might need to run again, Zora gathered dried wood. Her movements deliberate, economical. She'd learned to make herself useful quickly. Survival demanded it. "Tell me about your daughter," Arthur said. The wood in her hands stilled. "Ellie, 12 years old. Smart as a whip. Where is she?" "Underground Railroad has her. Safe house in Colorado." Zora's voice carried hope wrapped in fear. "Was supposed to meet them in Santa Fe." Arthur studied the dying fire. "We're heading the wrong direction." "I know." The weight of that sacrifice settled between them. She'd chosen to help him instead of finding her child. Trust paid in the hardest currency. John approached their fire. His weathered face showed the strain of divided loyalties. "Micah's heading to Silver Creek," he said. "Gonna tell the buyers we're rustlers. Take the contract for himself." Arthur spat into the flames. They hissed and danced higher. "Let him try. Half the cattle won't make it without someone who knows the trail. He's got the numbers now." "Numbers don't mean much if you're leading them into Apache territory." Zora looked up from the fire. "There's something else." "About why they want me." Arthur waited. The desert wind carried secrets in its whispers. "My former master wasn't just a plantation owner. He was hiding Union Army gold, stolen during the war." The revelation hung in the air like smoke. John's hand moved instinctively to his gun. "How much gold?" Arthur asked. "Enough to buy a small army. Or a lot of freedom." Arthur's mind worked through the implications. A wanted woman was one thing. A woman who knew the location of stolen military gold was another entirely. "You know where it is?" "I do." "And you didn't mention this before because—" Zora's laugh held no humor. "Because gold makes men do terrible things. Even good men." She was right. Arthur had seen it in the war. Brothers turning on brothers over far less. But trust, once given, demanded truth. Where? Hidden in the walls of a mission church, 3 days north of here. John whistled low. "That's a fortune." "That's a death sentence," Zora corrected. "Confederate veterans have been hunting it for years. They know I exist. They just don't know what I look like." Arthur understood now. The posse from Tombstone was the least of their worries. Word would spread. Bounty hunters, deserters, anyone desperate enough to risk everything for gold. "We could disappear," John said quietly. "Take the gold and run." "Could," Arthur agreed. "But then what? Spend our lives looking over our shoulders? Better than spending them 6 feet under." Arthur stared into the fire. The flames revealed no easy answers. Only the hard truth that every choice carried a price. "The gold stays hidden," he decided. For now, relief flickered across Zora's face. Another test passed. They rode at dawn. The landscape opened into vast stretches of scrubland, dotted with sage and Joshua trees. The cattle moved sluggishly in the heat. Water would be scarce for the next 2 days. By afternoon, dust clouds appeared behind them, riders moving fast. Too fast for a sheriff's posse weighed down by supplies. "Bounty hunters," Arthur said. They pushed the cattle harder. The animals protested, but fear drove them forward. Behind them, the dust clouds grew larger. Evening brought them to Painted Rock, a settlement that barely qualified as a town. 3 buildings and a well. The kind of place where questions weren't asked if money was offered. Arthur approached the saloon keeper, a thin man with nervous eyes. "Need to water our stock," Arthur said. The man looked at their group. His gaze lingered on Zora. "Don't serve her kind here. She's not asking for service. The cattle are." Money changed hands. The man's principles proved negotiable. They watered the animals and filled their canteens. Zora waited apart, understanding the dynamics without needing explanation. As they prepared to leave, riders appeared. 5 men, well-armed and determined. The leader wore a Union Army coat with lieutenant's bars. "That's him," Arthur said quietly to John. "The master's son," Lieutenant Hayes dismounted. His pale eyes fixed on Zora with the intensity of a predator. "You're harboring a fugitive," he said to Arthur. "I'm driving cattle to market. That woman murdered my father." Arthur stepped forward. "Your father was a grown man. Made his own choices. He was protecting his property." The word hung in the air like a curse. Property. As if Zora and her daughter were objects to be owned. "Property doesn't fight back," Arthur said. "People do." Hayes' hand moved to his weapon. His men spread out, flanking Arthur's smaller group. The mathematics of violence played out in positioning and angles. "Stand aside, Cowboy. This doesn't concern you. Everything about justice concerns me." The standoff stretched taut, 5 against 3. Bad odds made worse by protecting the cattle and Zora. Arthur's mind calculated options, all of them grim. Then Zora spoke. "There's a rider in the rocks above the saloon, behind you." Hayes spun. Arthur saw the muzzle flash before he heard the shot. Hayes stumbled, clutching his shoulder. His men wheeled their horses, searching for the sniper. "Move!" Arthur shouted. They scattered, cattle bellowing in panic. Gunfire echoing off red rocks. In the chaos, Arthur saw Zora helping drive the stock toward the canyon mouth. Her warning had saved their lives. The bounty hunters regrouped quickly. Professional killers adapted to changing circumstances. But the delay had given Arthur's group precious distance. They ran through the night, pushing cattle and horses to their limits. Behind them, the pursuit continued, relentless as death itself. At dawn, they stopped to rest in a box canyon. The animals gasped for water they didn't have. The men checked their weapons with grim efficiency. "How did you know about the sniper?" Arthur asked Zora. "I didn't. But I knew you needed a distraction." Arthur stared at her. She'd risked everything on a bluff. Turned a losing fight into an escape. "You saved our lives." "You saved mine first." The bond between them had shifted. No longer protector and protected, partners in survival. The desert had tested them both, and they'd proven worthy of trust. John approached, his face troubled. "We can't keep running forever. They'll wear us down." Arthur nodded. Running was a losing strategy, but the alternative meant fighting. And fighting meant some of them wouldn't see another sunrise. "The gold," Arthur said to Zora. "Time to use it." She met his eyes. Understanding passed between them. The game had changed. Now they'd play by different rules. The sun climbed higher. The desert waited. And somewhere behind them, death rode closer with each passing hour. The mission church rose from desert floor like a prayer made stone. San Miguel del Vado, abandoned since Apache raids drove out the priests. Now it held secrets worth more than salvation. Arthur studied the crumbling walls through field glasses. No movement, no tracks. The building sat empty under merciless sun, keeping its promises to the dead. "Third stone from the altar," Zora said quietly. "Behind the cross carved in the wall." They'd ridden hard for 2 days. The cattle grazed on sparse grass while Arthur's men kept watch. Trust had been earned in blood and sweat. Now it would be tested by gold. Arthur dismounted. His boots crunched on broken glass and bird bones. The church doors hung open, revealing darkness that felt heavy with waiting. Zora followed him inside. Dust motes danced in shafts of light. The altar stood defiant against time and weather. Behind it, carved stones told stories of faith and loss. Arthur found the third stone. The cross etched deep into its surface. His knife worked around the edges. Stone dust fell like gray snow. The blot shifted. Behind it, wrapped in oiled cloth, 20 gold eagles caught the light. "Just a sample," Zora said. "The rest is deeper." Arthur's hands trembled as he held the coins. More wealth than he'd seen in his lifetime. Enough to buy land, cattle, a different life. The temptation burned hotter than desert sun. "Why trust me with this?" he asked. "Because you gave me water without asking for payment." The truth of that moment echoed in the empty church. A simple act of decency that had changed everything. Arthur wrapped the coins carefully. "Place them back in their hiding place. We take what we need," he said. "Leave the rest." Outside, John waited with the others. Their faces showed the strain of constant vigilance. Men pushed past their limits, by circumstances beyond their control. "Find what you were looking for?" John asked. Arthur nodded. "Enough." They rode northwest toward Silver Creek. The landscape opened into rolling hills dotted with oak trees. Water became more abundant. The cattle moved easier, sensing better grazing ahead. That evening, Arthur and Zora sat apart from the others. The fire painted shadows on their faces. Words came slowly, drawn out by shared exhaustion. "Tell me about the war," Zora said. Arthur's hands stilled on the rifle he was cleaning. "Which part? The part that haunts you?" He looked at her, saw understanding in her dark eyes. She knew about carrying ghosts. "Andersonville," he said finally. "Prison camp. We liberated it near the end." The memory rose unbidden. Skeletal. Figures reaching through bars. The smell of death and desperation. Men reduced to animals by systematic cruelty. "I shot the commandant," Arthur continued. "Unarmed, surrendering, shot him anyway." Zora's hand touched his arm. "Brief contact that said more than words. Some men forfeit their right to mercy," she said. "That's what I tell myself." "And some nights you believe it." Arthur nodded. She understood. The weight of necessary choices. The price of survival in a world that offered no easy answers. "What about you?" he asked. "What keeps you awake? Wondering if I made the right choice. Saving myself instead of dying with her. Her, my sister. Sold south when we were children. I was too young to fight, too scared to try." The confession hung between them. Two people carrying guilt for crimes they'd never committed, for being human in inhuman circumstances. "You were a child," Arthur said. "So was she." They sat in silence. The fire crackled. Cattle lowed softly in the darkness. Around them, the desert held its breath. A sound from the rocks above. Arthur's hand moved to his weapon. John appeared, moving carefully down the slope. "Company coming," John reported. "Riders from the east." Arthur stood. Counted muzzle flashes in the distance. 6 men, moving fast. Too many to be casual travelers. "Hayes?" Zora asked. "Or someone else who wants the gold." They broke camp quickly. Loaded the cattle into movement. The night march began again, another desperate flight across hostile ground. Dawn found them. In a box canyon, high walls on 3 sides. One way in, one way out. Tactical suicide under normal circumstances. But the cattle needed water, and the spring here was the only source for miles. Arthur posted guards at the canyon mouth, checked ammunition, prepared for the fight that seemed inevitable. Mathematics of survival never favored the outnumbered. The riders appeared at midday. Not Hayes and his bounty hunters, Confederate veterans, gray-bearded and hard-eyed. Men who'd never accepted surrender. Still fighting a war that had ended 5 years ago, their leader rode forward. Colonel's insignia on his faded uniform. A man who'd commanded thousands, reduced to leading a handful of desperate souls. "We want the woman," he called out. Arthur stepped into view. "She's not for sale." "Everything's for sale, boy. Just a matter of price. What's your offer?" "Your lives." "Fair trade for what she knows." Arthur considered the mathematics. 6 against 3. Bad odds made worse by protecting the cattle. But the canyon walls worked both ways. Limited their enemy's movement while providing cover. "Counteroffer," Arthur said. "You ride away." "Live to see another sunset," the colonel laughed. "You got." "Sandboy, I'll give you that." The standoff stretched taut. Men and animals waiting for violence to break the tension. Arthur's mind calculated angles, distances, probabilities. All of them grim. Then Zora stepped forward. "I'll tell you where." "The gold is," she said. "In exchange for safe passage." Arthur's heart stopped. After everything, she was surrendering. Giving up the one thing that made her valuable. Zora, no. "It's hidden in the mission church," she continued. "Behind the altar. 3rd stone from." "The cross," the colonel smiled. "Much obliged, ma'am." He turned his horse, signaled his men to follow. They rode away at a gallop, leaving dust and the promise of violence unfulfilled. Arthur stared at Zora. "You just gave away our only leverage." "Did I?" Something in her tone made him look closer, the hint of a smile playing at her lips. A woman who'd survived by being smarter than her enemies. "The gold's not there anymore," he realized. "Moved it this morning, while you were checking the cattle." "Where?" "Somewhere they'll never find it. Somewhere safe." Arthur laughed, despite himself. She'd outmaneuvered Confederate veterans with nothing but quick thinking and careful words. Turned certain death into temporary reprieve. "You're dangerous," he said. "Only to people who deserve it." They left the canyon at sunset. The cattle moved slowly, but they moved. Another day survived. Another night to plan and hope and fight for something better than mere existence. Behind them, the desert held its secrets. Ahead, Silver Creek waited with its own challenges. But for now they had each other. Partners in survival. Allies in a war that had no clear ending. The stars appeared one by one, ancient lights watching over modern struggles. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and terrible, and utterly indifferent to human hopes. Arthur rode beside Zora. Their horses matched pace without conscious direction. 2 people who'd found something worth protecting in a world that offered little protection. The night was young, the danger far from over. But they were alive, and they were together, and sometimes that was enough. The wound in Arthur's shoulder leaked steadily through the bandage. 3 days since the ambush at Devil's Canyon. 3 days of riding with gritted teeth and shortened breath. Zora watched him sway in the saddle, his face gray with pain and blood loss. "We need to stop," she said. "Can't." "They're still following." The Confederate veterans had found the empty mission church. Rage had made them careless, but not stupid. They'd picked up the trail within hours. Now they rode with the focused intensity of men who'd been cheated. John brought his horse alongside Arthur's. "You're gonna fall off that horse if you don't rest." "I'm fine." "You're bleeding through the bandage." "That's not fine." Arthur's hands trembled on the reins. The pain was winning. Zora made the decision for him. There, she pointed to a cluster of rocks ahead. Natural shelter. We stopped there. Arthur lacked the strength to argue. They guided the cattle into the rocky enclosure. A small paradise hidden. In the wasteland, grass for the animals. A spring that trickled clear water over smooth stones. Zora helped Arthur from his horse. He leaned heavily against her, their bodies pressed close by necessity. She felt the fever burning through his shirt. Infection setting in, she said. She laid him on his bedroll near the spring. Unwrapped the bandage with careful fingers. The wound was angry red, edges swollen with poison. Without proper treatment, he'd be dead within days. Need to clean it out, she said. Arthur nodded. Bit down on a leather strap. Zora heated her knife blade in the fire. The metal glowed orange in the twilight. She looked into his eyes, seeing. Trust there despite the pain. This will hurt. The blade cut into infected flesh. Arthur's body arched, every muscle rigid with agony. But he didn't cry out, didn't pull away. Trusted her completely with his life. Blood and pus flowed from the wound. Zora worked quickly, efficiently, cutting away dead tissue, cleaning the infection that would have killed him. Her hands steady despite the intimacy of the act. Where did you learn this? Arthur asked through gritted teeth. My mother. She was a healer before they sold her. What happened to her? Died in chains. But not before teaching me everything she knew. Zora packed the wound with clean moss. Wrapped it in torn cloth. Arthur's breathing eased as the worst of the poison drained away. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me yet. Fever's still coming. Night brought delirium. Arthur thrashed on his bedroll, fighting invisible enemies, calling out names of dead soldiers, reliving battles that had ended years ago. Zora stayed beside him, cooling his forehead with damp cloth, holding him still when the dreams became too violent. John watched from across the fire, his expression unreadable. You love him, John said quietly. Zora's hands stilled on Arthur's fevered brow. He's a good man. That's not what I asked. She looked at John, saw understanding in his weathered face. Another man who'd learned to read hearts in the wilderness. Love's a luxury I can't afford, she said. Maybe, but it's there anyway. Arthur's fever broke at dawn. His eyes opened clear for the first time in days. He found Zora asleep beside him, her hand resting on his chest. The sight of her exhausted face, marked by worry and sleepless nights, hit him harder than any bullet. How long? He asked. 2 days, John answered. She didn't leave your side. Arthur studied Zora's sleeping face. The strong line of her jaw, the way her hair had escaped its pins to frame her cheeks. Beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional standards. I'd rather die free with you than live safe without you, he said quietly. John heard the words, understood their weight. Arthur had chosen his path, no turning back now. Zora woke to find Arthur watching her. Color had returned to his face. The fever's grip broken. How do you feel? She asked. Like I got kicked by a mule. But alive, she smiled. The first genuine smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, revealing the woman she might have been in a kinder world. Good, because we have company. Arthur sat up carefully, saw dust clouds on the horizon. Multiple groups converging on their position. The Confederate veterans from one direction. Hayes and his bounty hunters from another, and something new. Union cavalry riding hard from the east. You're past catching up, Zora observed. Arthur recognized the blue uniforms. His former regiment, led by the one man he'd hoped never to see. Again, Colonel Morrison, he said, my commanding officer. The one who listed you as a deserter? The same. 3 separate forces closing in, each with their own agenda. Arthur's small group caught in the middle with nowhere to run. "We could try to slip away," John suggested. Arthur shook his head. "They've got us boxed in. Time to make a stand." Zora checked her rifle. "What are our chances?" "Poor, but we've beat poor odds before." The Confederate veterans arrived first. 6 men still wearing the gray, still fighting a war that had ended 5 years ago. They took position in the rocks above. Hayes came next with his bounty hunters. Professional killers motivated by money and revenge. They spread out along the canyon mouth, cutting off escape. Finally, the Union cavalry. 20 men in blue uniforms, led by a colonel who'd never forgotten a perceived slight. They formed ranks with military precision. Arthur stood slowly. The wound pulled at his shoulder, but he remained upright. Zora moved to his side. John flanked them both. "Arthur Morgan." Colonel Morrison called out, "You're under arrest for desertion." "I fulfilled my duty," Arthur replied. "War's over. Not for you. Not until you face justice." The Confederate colonel laughed. "Justice? From the men who burned the South? This doesn't concern you, rebel." "Everything about that gold concerns me." Hayes stepped forward. "The woman's mine. Got a legal warrant. 3 forces, 3 agendas." Arthur saw the opportunity in their division. "Seems like you boys need to work out your differences," he said. "We'll settle this after we take what we came for," Morrison replied. "Will you?" "Because I'm thinking none of you trust the others." Arthur's words found their mark. Suspicious glances passed between the groups. Old enemies forced into temporary alliance. The kind of partnership that shattered under pressure. "The gold's not here," Zora said suddenly. Every weapon turned toward her. She stood calmly under the scrutiny, unafraid of the violence that surrounded her. "Where is it?" The Confederate colonel demanded. "Safe, hidden where you'll never find." We'll see about that." But doubt had crept into their ranks. 3 groups who wanted different things, united only by greed and circumstance. Arthur watched the fragile alliance begin to crack. "John," he said quietly, "when this starts, get the cattle out." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." The lie came easily. They both knew Arthur wouldn't abandon Zora, wouldn't run when she needed him most. "The Underground Railroad moved it," Zora continued. "Used it to buy freedom for dozens of people." "You're lying," Hayes snarled. "Am I? Check the Mission Church." "See what you find." Morrison's patience snapped. "Enough. Take them." The order shattered the temporary peace. 3 forces lunged forward. Arthur grabbed Zora's hand. "Run!" They scattered into the rocks. Gunfire erupted behind them. Not aimed at them, but at each other. Greed and old hatreds finally breaking into open warfare. Arthur pulled Zora toward the spring. Behind them, the desert echoed with the sound of men killing each other over gold that was already gone. The irony wasn't lost on him. They'd survived. By telling the truth, the gold was gone. Moved by people who understood its true value. Used to buy the one thing that mattered more than wealth, freedom. The gunfire faded behind them as Arthur and Zora reached the far side of the canyon. 3 groups of enemies had turned on each other, their temporary alliance shattered by greed and old hatreds. Arthur pressed his back against sun-warmed stone, listening to the distant sounds of men destroying themselves over gold that no longer existed. "Where's John?" Zora asked. Arthur scanned the rocky landscape. No sign of his friend or the cattle. Either John had escaped, or he was dead. The mathematics of survival offered no middle ground. "He knows the plan," Arthur said. "Get the cattle." "To Silver Creek." "And us?" Arthur looked at her. Saw the question behind her eyes. Not just about survival, but about what came after. What they meant to each other when the immediate danger passed. "We find your daughter," the words hung between them. A promise that carried more weight than gold. Arthur had chosen his path. Not just protecting a fugitive, but claiming a future he'd never dared imagine. They moved through the desert like ghosts, following game trails and dry creek beds, avoiding the main roads where bounty hunters and cavalry patrols might spot them. The land stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and merciless. On the second day, they found a burned-out homestead, charred timber and broken dreams, scattered across hard-pan earth. But the well still held water, and the root cellar offered shelter from the sun. Arthur examined their meager supplies. Enough food for 3 days if they rationed carefully. Ammunition for perhaps one serious fight, not enough for the journey ahead. "Tell me about the Underground Railroad," he said. Zora's hand stilled on the jerky she was dividing. "What about it? How you contacted them? How they knew to help you? There are signs. People who know how to read them. A quilt pattern on a clothesline, candles in certain windows." Arthur absorbed this information. A secret network operating under the noses of law enforcement, funded by stolen gold and driven by something more valuable than money. And John? What about him? "He's been acting strange since Tombstone, disappearing at night, getting messages he won't discuss." Zora looked at Arthur, measuring his capacity for truth. Another moment of trust in a relationship built on accumulated faith. "John's been helping us from the beginning," she said quietly. Arthur felt the ground shift beneath him. Everything he'd believed about their situation had been filtered through assumptions. John hadn't stayed out of loyalty to Arthur. He'd stayed to protect Zora. He's railroad? Has been for years, moving people north, hiding them. When necessary, the cattle drive was perfect cover. Arthur processed this revelation. His oldest friend had been living a double life, fighting a war Arthur barely understood, risking everything for strangers who would never know his name. Why didn't he tell me? Would you have believed him? Trusted him with that kind of secret? Arthur considered the question honestly. A week ago, he would have called John a fool for risking his life for runaway slaves. Now he understood the mathematics of human dignity. Some things were worth dying for. "The gold," Arthur said. "You really gave it to them?" "Every coin. Used it to buy freedom for people who needed it more than I did." "And your daughter?" "Safe, hidden in Colorado with people who care more about her humanity than her skin color." Arthur felt something shift in his chest. Not just attraction to a beautiful woman, but recognition of a kindred spirit. Someone who understood that survival wasn't enough. That dignity mattered more than safety. "We should keep moving," he said. They traveled by night when possible. The desert cooled to tolerable temperatures after sunset. Stars provided navigation. Darkness offered concealment from the forces still hunting them. On the third night, they encountered another traveler. A woman on foot, carrying a bundle that moved and occasionally whimpered. Zora recognized the signs immediately. "How far?" "To the next station?" Zora asked quietly. The woman looked up, saw something in Zora's face that spoke of shared experience. 2 days north. If they're still operating, they are. Ask for Harriet. Tell her Zora sent you." The woman nodded gratefully, disappeared into the darkness with her precious cargo. Another link in the chain that stretched from bondage to freedom. Arthur watched the exchange with growing understanding. This wasn't just about helping Zora find her daughter. It was about becoming part of something larger than themselves. A movement that transformed individuals into instruments of justice. "How many people have you helped?" he asked. "Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Hard to keep count when you're just one link in a long chain." "And John?" "More than me. He's been at this longer." Arthur felt shame at his ignorance. His friend had been a hero while Arthur focused on cattle and profit. Fighting for humanity while Arthur worried about mundane concerns. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we reach Colorado. Find Ellie. Start over somewhere safe. And me? Zora stopped walking, turned to face him in the starlight. Her expression was soft but serious. That depends on what you want. Arthur looked at her, saw the woman who'd offered herself for water, the healer who'd saved his life, the mother who'd sacrificed everything for her daughter's freedom, the fighter who'd outmaneuvered Confederate veterans and bounty hunters. I want to be worthy of your trust, he said. You already are. They reached the Colorado border at dawn. The landscape changed gradually from desert to grassland. Green shoots pushed through winter-hard ground. The promise of spring in a world that had seemed locked in permanent winter. A rider approached from the north. John, mounted on a fresh horse and leading 2 others. His weathered face showed relief at finding them alive. Thought you might be dead, he said. Not yet, Arthur replied. The cattle? Safe in Silver Creek. Sold them to a man who doesn't ask questions about paperwork. Arthur felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The job was done. The crew paid. His obligations to the normal world finally settled. There's something else. John continued. Message from Harriet about your daughter. Zora's entire body went rigid. What about her? She's safe, but they had to move her. Confederate raiders hit the safe house 2 days ago. Where is she now? Denver, with a family named the Washingtons, good people. Been helping the railroad for years. Arthur saw the relief flood through Zora's body. Her daughter was alive, safe, waiting for a reunion that had seemed impossible just days before. How far to Denver? Arthur asked. Half a day's ride, if we start now. Arthur looked at Zora, saw the tears she was trying to hide. The hope she was afraid to fully embrace. A mother's love that had survived separation, slavery, and the constant threat of death. Then let's go home, he said. The word carried weight he hadn't expected. Home wasn't a place. It was the people you chose to protect. The family you built from shared struggle and accumulated trust. They mounted the fresh horses, rode north toward Denver. Toward a reunion that would change everything. The morning sun painted the grassland gold, and for the first time in months, the future felt bright. With possibility, behind them, the desert held its secrets. The mission church stood empty, the gold had found its purpose. And somewhere in the vastness, men were still fighting over dreams that had already been transformed into something more valuable than wealth. Freedom. Family. The chance to start over in a world that might finally be ready for change. Denver sprawled across the prairie like a promise half kept. Buildings rose from grassland, defying the vastness that surrounded them. Smoke from 100 chimneys painted the sky gray with human ambition. Arthur rode beside Zora, watching her. Hands tremble on the reins as they approached the city limits. She might not remember me, Zora said quietly. She remember. It's been 8 months. She was so small when they took her. Arthur reached across the space between their horses. Touched her hand briefly. Blood remembers. The Washington house sat on a tree-lined street where children played in fenced yards. A world Arthur had never imagined. Safe, stable. The kind of place where families could grow without fear of separation or sale. Harriet met them at the gate. A small woman with steel in her spine and kindness in her eyes. She'd risked everything to shepherd strangers toward freedom. Her face showed the weight of that responsibility. She's inside, Harriet said. Been waiting by the window all morning. Zora dismounted with careful precision. Each movement deliberate, as if sudden motion might shatter the moment. Arthur watched her smooth her dress, check her hair. A mother preparing to meet her child after months of separation. What if she's forgotten me? Zora asked again. Then you'll remind her, Arthur said. The front door opened. A small girl appeared, framed by afternoon light. 12 years old, but with eyes that had seen too much. She stared at the woman approaching the gate, recognition dawning slowly across. Her face. Mama? The word broke something in Zora's chest. She ran toward the gate, her dignity forgotten in the face of overwhelming joy. Ellie ran too, their bodies colliding in an embrace that erased months of fear and uncertainty. Arthur watched from horseback, saw the reunion he'd risked everything to make possible. Mother and daughter, whole again despite the forces that had tried to tear them apart. "Thank you," Zora whispered over Ellie's head. Arthur nodded. No words could capture the weight of what they'd accomplished, or the price they'd paid to reach this moment. The celebration was brief. Danger still followed them like a shadow. Colonel Morrison's cavalry was only hours behind. The Confederate veterans might still be hunting. And Hayes would never stop seeking revenge for his father's death. "You can't." "Stay here," Harriet said. "Too risky for the network." "Where then?" Arthur asked. "Oregon Territory. Land grants for settlers. Far enough from the war that the past might finally stay buried." Arthur looked at Zora, saw her holding Ellie close, as if she could protect her daughter through proximity alone. A family reunited, but not yet safe. "We'll need supplies," he said. "Horses. Provisions for the trail. Already arranged. John's seeing to it now." Arthur felt the familiar weight of preparation. Another journey. Another chance to start over. But this time, he wasn't running from something. He was running toward it. That evening, they sat around the Washington family table. Ellie between her mother and the man who'd helped save her. The girl studied Arthur with the careful attention of someone who'd learned to evaluate strangers quickly. "Are you going to marry my mama?" she asked. Arthur nearly choked on his coffee. Zora's face flushed with embarrassment. "Ellie," Zora said sharply. "It's a fair question," Arthur replied. He looked at Zora, saw the uncertainty in her eyes. "I'd like to. If you have me." "I'd like that too," Ellie said solemnly. Zora laughed despite herself. "Don't I get a say in this?" Arthur waited. The question hung between them, weighted with everything they'd shared. The danger, the trust, the quiet moments when they'd chosen each other over safety. "Yes," she said finally. "I'd like that too." They left Denver at dawn, a small wagon train heading west. Arthur and Zora, Ellie between them on the wagon seat. John riding scout, a family born from necessity and sealed by choice. The Rocky Mountains rose before them, snow-capped peaks that touched the sky. The trail wound through valleys where wildflowers carpeted the ground. Spring had come to the high country, bringing new life to winter-scarred earth. "Tell me about Oregon," Ellie said. "Green valleys," Arthur replied. "Rivers full of salmon. Trees so tall they block out the sun. And we'll be safe there?" Arthur looked at Zora, saw her nod slightly. "The lie they told to give children hope. We'll be together," he said. "That's what matters." They made good time through the mountains. The trail was well marked, traveled by countless settlers seeking new lives in the Western Territories. Each mile took them farther from the violence that had shaped their meeting. On the fourth day, they encountered other travelers. A family from Missouri heading to California. Children playing beside the trail while their parents repaired a broken wheel. The kind of normal domestic scene that Arthur had never thought possible. "Are you married?" the woman asked Zora. "Soon," Zora replied, taking Arthur's hand. The woman smiled. "That's wonderful. Nothing like starting fresh in new country." They camped together that night, shared food and stories around a common fire. Ellie played with the other children, her laughter carrying across the mountain air. Arthur watched Zora's face, saw the peace settling into her features. "No more running," she said quietly. "No more running," he agreed. They reached Oregon Territory in late spring. The Willamette Valley spread before them, green and fertile, and empty of the ghosts that had haunted their previous lives. Arthur filed a claim on bottomland near the river. Rich soil for farming, timber for building, water for everything else. The cabin rose slowly from the forest floor. Logs cut from their own land, shingles split by Arthur's hands. A home built. With purpose and patience. Zora planted a garden while Ellie explored the woods, learning the names of trees and flowers. By summer, they had neighbors. Other families seeking fresh starts in virgin territory. The community grew organically, bound by shared struggles and common hopes. Arthur's past as a gunfighter became irrelevant. Here, he was a farmer, a husband, a father to a girl who'd never known safety. The wedding was simple. Held in the schoolhouse. They'd helped build. Ellie stood beside her mother, beaming with pride. John gave the bride away, his weathered face showing rare emotion. The preacher spoke about new beginnings and second chances. "Do you take this woman to be your wife?" The preacher asked. "I do," Arthur said. "In sickness and in health, in good times and bad, I do." Arthur looked at Zora, remembered the desperate woman who'd offered herself for water. Saw the confident wife and mother she'd become. The transformation was complete. "You may kiss." The bride. Arthur kissed his wife while their neighbors cheered. Ellie clapped her hands in delight. Outside, the Oregon sun painted the valley gold with afternoon light. 6 months later, Arthur sat on his porch, watching Zora tend her garden. Ellie played nearby, building elaborate houses from river stones. The domestic peace felt miraculous after everything they'd endured. Zora approached the porch, carrying a dipper of water from the well. She offered it to Arthur with a smile. "No strings attached this time," she said. Arthur took the water gratefully. "I was hoping you'd say that." She settled beside him on the porch swing they'd built together. Their hands found each other naturally, fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "Any regrets?" she asked. Arthur considered the question. His old life seemed distant now. The violence, the constant movement, the loneliness that had eaten at him for years. All of it traded for this moment of perfect contentment. "None," he said. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter play. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Crops to tend, neighbors to help, a community to build. But tonight, they were simply a family. Safe in the home they'd built together, free to love without fear. The desperate bargain that had brought them together had become something neither of them had dared hope for. A future worth fighting for. A life worth living. A love strong enough to survive anything the world might throw at them. Arthur squeezed Zora's hand. She squeezed back. Words weren't necessary. They'd found what they'd been searching for without knowing it. Each other, home, peace. The stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, ancient lights watching over modern dreams. The valley settled into evening quiet, and the family sat together on their porch, grateful for the simple miracle of being. Alive and together and free. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.